This episode of the Better Every Shift podcast is sponsored by the Fire Store. Learn more about getting the gear you need at prices you can afford by visiting thefirestore.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Better Every Shift podcast. My name is Aaron Zamza. I'll be your host. I'm a fire officer. I also write for Fire Rescue One. And today I'm joined by one of my team members here at Fire Rescue One. I think one of the unsung heroes. And I mention a lot of times Janelle being the editor-in-chief, and she's also the producer of this program. But there's a lot of people that have been working in the fire service behind the scenes, helping us not only, to produce news but also to produce articles that help make us better. And today I got with me Bill Carey, who has been a writer here in the fire service for over 20 years. He's a former Maryland volunteer firefighter and an officer, and now he's serving here as the associate editor for Fire Rescue One and EMS One. And we're going to get into some of the articles that he wrote and some of the things that he researches for us in the fire service. But first and foremost, welcome to the program, Bill. Good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
Well, you got the Navy sweatshirt on, so you're East Coast. We kind of know that. And how you got involved in writing is kind of interesting. You have over 20 years experience, and I asked you what your background was, and it's a pretty interesting story. How did you get involved and started, in writing for Fire Rescue One and in just doing the fire service kind of angle with media?
It was literally just the good friendship of two friends at the Hyattsville Fire Department. We were members there together, and when they had created the site firehouse.com and it expanded, I got asked to come work with them doing content managing there with the employment section. And then as years passed, they went on to create Firefighter Nation and then asked me to come work for them there. So I did. And then more years passed and went on, and we were bought by Firefighter Nation was bought by Fire Engineering, so I worked for them, and then went back to work with Chris and Dave, and now the opportunity came to come work for Fire Rescue One.
Yeah, for Janelle and Shannon and all the wonderful people that are here, right? Like they are building this team, and I like to say team because I never thought that I would be, being a podcast host and a writer. But Janelle makes it really easy, and you give us some really good data. You give us some really good ideas, and I like to read some of your articles, and I also know that you do a lot on LODD data and rescue data, but you also have this blog that you write, Data Not Drama. How did that come about?
That whole impetus came about just one of my best friends back home, also in the fire service. We had a discussion about line of duty deaths and what constitutes a line of duty death, and various other like blue collar industries and how they rate workplace fatalities. And so I just out of my own curiosity and whim just started looking at the information that's out there each year, and then started writing a little bit about it, just putting it out there, just mainly just to see if it resonated with anybody, if it sparked any questions. And sure enough, it turned into now a full-blown site and articles and presentations that I've given about the data itself, not actually about like the actual fatalities and the fireground actions and contributing factors, but just about the numbers themselves and how to put it blunt, how bad our fatality data is. And so that spurs I get questions just about every week. Somebody's asking about a certain number they heard or read an article or heard in a presentation, or in some cases they're asking, hey, where's my department's NIOSH report, something like that. So yeah, it's really spun off into something that I'm told by the readers that is helping them understand the information better, especially as they work with their training.
Yeah, well, let's dig into that a little bit, because you wrote a great article. It's called "Everyone Goes Home Except for Some Recruits and Applicants," and that was how did that come about? I mean, I think there's more to that story than just that particular article, correct?
Yeah. So this past year, I opportunity to be asked to present with the folks behind the firefighter rescue survey program. They were doing their ambassador class in Virginia, and they were talking about search. And so Brian Brush and the others there asked me if I would present from my wheelhouse information about search-related line of duty deaths. And so when I started working on that and pulling it together, one thing that I knew from the previous writings I'd done before, that search-related firefighter deaths are very low. But when you look at like yearly reports, the number's pretty large. And the reason for that is because our criteria and our definitions for line of duty deaths is so broad and so vague. So as it happens, leading into this article, many of our search deaths are actually training deaths. Some of them are traumatic, most of them are non-traumatic, but that's how this led to that part of it there. It's like, yes, VES is dangerous, but we're not dying by tens of 20s each year for doing VES. We're dying because we're, not paying attention to the heat index and other factors.
Yeah. So when someone will say, oh, someone passed away, we have a line of duty death because of search, it could be that's the activity they were doing in training.
Well, it'll come up under it'll come up under two ways though that the USDA lists it. The activity type will be like search, and the duty type will be like training. So like you can have a firefighter who will let's say they have like cardiac arrest doing SCBA maze training. So they'll be listed under training, and they'll also be listed under search. A firefighter doing water rescue training, they'll be listed under, who dies or drowns or something like that, they'll be listed under training and under search. Okay. So if you have to really get into the specifics each year of every single death that's in those categories to determine whether or not it was a fireground or classroom training or hands-on.
So like, let's say someone's searching on a training and they die of a cardiac arrest. How is that then? That's just is that a cardiac arrest, or we also say cardiac arrest due to exertion, or is it due to search, or how do we?
Yeah. So like the cause of nature would be like stress over exertion, and their activity type would be, search, and their duty type would be training.
Training. Okay. And so that kind of sparked you to go, okay, wait a minute. A lot of these are happening in training. How many exactly, right? Like, so you really started to dig into how many basically recruits, applicants. I mean, where did that kind of go?
Because when we finished that, when we were at that doing that presentation in Virginia, and it finished with like a Q&A around Rob and everybody. And, one of the things was like, what do you do to like make sure people are safe and stuff like that? And it came to my time to answer. I was just like, just stop killing people in training. Literally, but I mean, get rid of the fact that you're a Marine Corps DI or some, SEAL Buds instructor and your program is Hell Week. You're not. You're the fire department. Just pay attention, incorporate EMS, and listen to your recruits and have them listen to their bodies, and then also just get them checked out prior to all this starts. So that's what led to that part, more to the article. Just like, okay, well, why? What's happening that we have recruits and candidates dying in the initial phases.
So as you dug into it, I mean, how many are we talking about too? I know the article you wrote, kind of went into that a little bit and gave some actual examples, but you're talking about, firefighters that some were burned in live burns, I believe, right? Some were just going through like, agility testing. I mean, what was the biggest kind of surprise? I mean, other than, we're killing people in training, which shouldn't be happening, right? Like,
right.
What other things stood out?
The live burns don't, to me personally, didn't particularly stand out because they, everything from like Delaware and Lairdsville, New York, all the way up through Baltimore and past, they're pretty much, and I don't mean it in a disrespectful manner, but they're pretty much the same thing. The fuel packages, nobody's paying attention. There's no monitoring. There's no safety. There's no RIC. The big thing that stood out for me was the number of departments, especially in the summer months, that are doing hands-on training, whether it's like fireground evolutions or SCBA maze training or SCBA competence training, that are doing that, especially when there's a high heat index with no EMS, not even BLS on the scene. So there've been a few NIOSH reports that have revealed that some departments that had these types of deaths didn't even have an ambulance on the scene. In one particular instance, the victim was put in the back of a utility truck and driven the distance to meet an incoming medic unit. So it's just something very basic as not even having like an AED and a BLS crew on the scene.
Yeah. Well, and then that goes into prep too. Like, how are we prepping, especially in recruit academies, or before recruit academies? What's the medical testing process, right? I think that was also mentioned, that how are we vetting to make sure that our firefighters are even in good enough shape to be doing the training, right? Like, that was another thing I read. Following NFPA guidelines for medicals, that was another failure on a lot of cases that you found.
Yeah. So it's just as simple as just having. When I explain about others situations, it's like at least here in this area, like with my daughter, when each year in high school, when she did junior ROTC and when she did softball, she had to get a physical exam. It's common, everybody has that for their children with their school sports or whatever activities. So like for 4 years, that's 2 exams in addition to the regular GP exam that we have to. Many places in the fire service here in the country, even in this day and age, just to be an active member, you can have to be 18 and have a valid driver's license. So as much as we preach about our health and safety and all types of screenings and whatnot, there's still places where members are coming in and there's no baseline at all for where they stand as far as health.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter what age, because we're finding that some of the line of duty deaths are younger people, right? That have something that hasn't been diagnosed, or younger people that aren't in good physical stature to start.
It's not so much as we think. The number of young people who are dying, let's say in that USFA age group of like the late teens up into the late 20s, that number's pretty low compared to the past 10, 15 years. One, because it's a new generation. So like, those of us who have kids now, they're like in their 20s, and those who, have other kids coming up, that generation, at least what I've seen is, especially in the fire services, they're more attuned to their physical health and fitness. It's not like working out and being fit just for the job. To them, it's like a hobby. It's a habit. It's a lifestyle. So those numbers of those young people dying, those on-duty deaths, those non-traumatic ones, are really, really low. So like I said, it's a generational thing.
Yeah. So so is it middle age then that you're finding, right? Like through 30s and above, or 50s and above?
Yeah, 50s and above. Yeah.
Okay. So it's that generation that maybe didn't necessarily have that kind of more fitness bug, and now they're joining in like a volunteer department, or possibly even full time, going through, not having those assessments in some cases, and
right.
and then having the traumatic episode without any EMS. So it's this kind of like trail of disaster waiting to happen, right?
Right.
And then you throw in the old school, like, hey, we're gonna burn them up, we're gonna make them feel heat, right? Like, that's the other part of that that kind of contributes, right? And you and I were talking behind the scenes too. You just kind of shake your head. You're just like, all these things are things that we can do to prevent, right? Like, why is that continuing to happen?
Part of it, I think, has to do with, I hate using the word culture, but I think part of it has to do with culture. People in the leadership, again, that's a different generation. Even if they're like in their 30s and 40s, that's a different generation from my generation. I'm in my late 50s. So, you inherit things that are cultural in your department, and that's how you learn and pass things on. It's a hard thing to break when it's also part of like your identity. So I think in some places where you have like these heavy, real intense, almost like military basic training type academies, if you're not working to be aware and alert to any problems that might come up as far as medical problems for your candidates, you're just setting yourself up for disaster.
Yeah.
And I'm not against, the hard, if your department has a military style academy, well, I think that's good. You need to have a little bit of that adversity going on in there and that resistance right in there. I'm not saying let's water down or lessen any requirements or restrictions or anything like that, but it just idea of just you got to incorporate some EMS in there. Otherwise you're going to be, another department that we're going to report on next month who had a guy die during CPAT or had a woman die during SCBA drill.
Yeah. Well, it's a simple step. Just have you're saying AEDs there. Also, hydrate and teach teach the importance of just fueling your body properly, right, pre, post, and how hydration can play into performance. I think, my background was the fitness and nutrition before I really kind of more branched out into the podcast stuff. But like hydration, decrease in hydration can really put a big strain on your cardiac, function and performance, just because as you get dehydrated, your blood becomes more thick. Heart has to work harder, simple things like that, like taking hydration breaks, right? And you had said, why are we doing these trainings when the heat index is so high? So being a little bit more strategic, probably planning that, having EMS, is there anything that kind of you were really, really like, as you looked, you're like, oh, I would have never thought this would have led to a line of duty death?
I think the main thing that surprises me is just the ones that are somewhat repeated. It's just the location changes because, which is really weird because, we're in this huge information age and it's like, well, hey, you should be aware of this because, this department in the next state over just did the same thing. And so how did you miss that? But we're also very siloed as far as what our information and where we get it from and how we read. So it just amazes me now. Sometimes so many things are repeated, but yet it's, you think, how could you not know this? But some places do, like for instance, well, to go back how you doing earlier, like if you look at like the states that do like not the states, but the states that have the smoke diver classes.
Yep.
Okay. But I mean, they're in tune to prepping and making sure you're squared away before you start and as you go through. So then in my opinion, it's like, okay, well, if your department isn't really, wrapped up as far as incorporating the smoke diver type training, but you want to have a pretty aggressive, resistant, basic training, but you don't have EMS incorporated, or you're not asking for physicals or baseline checks, anything like that, then it's not going to be a surprise, but it happens.
Yeah. Right. You said it's not going to be a surprise. And then when it does happen, people are still surprised, but you're saying, just look back at history and this all happens, but another interesting part about it too is, so there's a difference between applicants and recruits, right? Like, so applicants are not, if they're died, like doing or something happens when they're doing CPAT, that's not counted as line of duty.
Well, that's what I took a look at because the USFA definitions, a firefighter is anybody who's employed or brought on to do the work of a firefighter for a fire department. And that includes fire brigades, that includes industrial, that includes the Department of Defense and all that. So if you're a recruit and let's say everybody hires differently, the process is different. So someplace they might say, okay, you pass the written test and you pass the background investigation, you pass the physical fitness test. So it's kind of like you're conditionally employed pending you pass the academy. So if you die during that period, well, you're a member of the department. So the USFA counts you. If, for example, the other side, if let's say your department is doing just like a CPAT orientation, just, hey, if you're interested in wanting to join the fire department, what would it be like? We're having this opportunities, where you can come by and try on the gear, stuff like that, try the CPAT test. If you die during that, then no, because you're not an employee, you're not in the hiring process. And then also the wording too is different. Most places have recruit or a probationary firefighter. Some places like Cleveland, they have cadet. But like where I'm come from, that's a cadet is like somebody in their teens.
Yeah.
So it's important. It's important to understand the wording because people will read stuff, especially on social media, and just go with it, and they'll think cadet, they'll think, oh, well, a teen. But, Cleveland, I think he was like in his 30s. I have to get back and check. So it's important to understand that there's these definitions and where they are in that actual hiring process or the employment process, and then also what one department calls another.
Yeah. So there is, and then like the other part about the data too, and we had talked about, data, not drama. As you go, like you've done some other research into like actual, like not for recruits, line of duty deaths. Like what are some of the other things as you kind of then started to look more into LODD? First of all, why is there just this discrepancy or wide open? Why are we not more precise, or how can we get more precise with line of duty deaths data?
It would involve the recording and the dissemination of all the information, the yearly reports to be done, basically be redone and in greater detail. But currently they're not. And so what happens is we get presented with the yearly reports, and they give us what I call lump sum numbers. They'll say, X number of firefighters died doing this, X number of firefighters died doing that. And in their categories are very broad, like I've said before. So like I mentioned in search, how it's a broad category. Fire attack, advancing hose lines, that's a very, very broad category. It's not just being like on the nozzle or the backup position in a fire. It includes wildland, and it includes exterior fires. It includes cutting fire lines, felling trees. It includes, I've used the example sometimes in sort of the presentations. If you're at a fire and you are directed to, hey, take the 350 round to the back, and you pull the round to the back and you drop dead of a heart attack. Well, you're advancing hose lines, fire attack.
Huh. Just because you have a hose line in your hand.
Just because you have a hose line in your hand.
So like NIFRS and is NERIS going to help with this possibly? And then when you look at like the health side of stuff, I know it's very frustrating because there is HIPAA. I mean, how can we get better? How can that be improved?
We collectively, as a fire service or a fire department that wants to improve, especially related to health and being aware of anything that might come up as far as a risk in their area for longest, is to read the NIOSH reports. And I don't mean that like in a glib way, but like to me, for what I write about, some of the most interesting and surprising NIOSH reports are the ones that are non-traumatic, because then you find out, you get a snapshot of fire service culture, in a sense, and in each one of those departments. So you'll find, like I said before, some departments, if you're upright and breathing and can drive, you're a member. Other departments, it's a very, very detailed process. Some departments, there's the fit test exam, there's the annual medical physical wellness check, there's the fitness check. So some departments, there's not even a fit test exam. And regrettably, like I found in some of the writing I've done, sometimes the victims have withheld their own medical history from departments. So
they may have known something at that point too.
Yeah,
right?
There have been a couple in the past year where when the NIOSH investigators went through department information and the family information and stuff from the doctors, they found out that the victim, was told, hey, you need to stop, or you have this medical condition which is going to affect you, and you should get it checked before you go back, and they would help.
Yeah, and I think it all goes back to, hey, we have to take care of ourselves so we can help provide a service, and that we don't become that statistic that maybe impairs or puts our other brothers and sisters in danger. And it's a lot of it's just too like, okay, if we're doing these strenuous tasks and training, let's have these things in place automatically. AED, some EMS equipment there, and in some cases, extra people. If especially in live burns, following that NFPA was at 1403 and making sure that, I think it's just, it's sad that these things are still happening. And that, we all have to learn. How are we learning from line of duty deaths? In some cases, like you said, it's just the same thing.
The Fire Store, equipping protectors with passion. Every decision we make is about you, our customer. We understand that having the right gear can mean the difference between life and death. Our goal is to get you the gear you need, when you need it, at prices you can afford. This holiday season, listeners receive 10% off now through December 31st with promo code FRP10. Visit thefirestore.com for everything but the truck. Now let's get back to the show.
The other side of your work is that you do the newsletters, and you put forth a lot of the news that we have in the fire service. There's also a lot of similarities with that. We do a lot of dumb stuff, don't we, to ourselves?
Yeah.
You can be frank, man. Like, because I read, and you do a great job of the newsletters, but it always just seems like there's some improprieties that happen, or we just, we'll drive fire trucks to do dumb things, or right? Like, do you shake your head and just go, we're doing the same thing, we're hurting ourselves a lot?
Sometimes, but then, we're human. We're broken creatures. So, and it's not a perfect world. It's not a perfect job. It's not a perfect environment. So some things are going to go bad. And that's not a fatalist view, but it's like, okay, yeah, we're going to see this happen again. Or, oh, well, they did that. So it's another one on the list.
How do you get all the news articles?
We use a service that, calls news reports. So we have a connection with the Associated Press, and then we have a connection which calls local news reports from all across the country that deal with fire departments, firefighters, fire chiefs, EMS, fire apparatus, paramedics, everything in there. And it's just, we go through each morning and then also throughout the day and look in there and see what, for me, what appeals as far as what would be engaging with our readers, but would also share some of our original content related to training or leadership or grants or recruitment and stuff like that. So anything that helps engages with our readers, and then also gives them like the next step into either learn more or to look into things to benefit themselves and their departments.
Yeah, I know your article on why are we killing our recruits, and or everyone goes home except for sometimes our recruits and applicants. Like that has some great links to some of these things that we talk about, annual medicals and NFPA. Now, if people have articles that are like, hey, this is newsworthy, I think the rest of the fire service, do you get people that send you stories, and do you encourage that?
Yeah, we do encourage that. I'm a big proponent of that. Yeah. But what resonates more and can capture that aha moment for a reader would be hearing about a department that's similar to theirs, that either solved a problem or experienced a problem and overcame it and passed on some lessons learned.
So they can email. You okay? We leave your email, or we'll leave a link within the show notes for it. So for our listeners, you can help contribute to what we're putting together here. And the other part about this too is I always love the feel good stories that we don't hear a lot about, right? Like, I love to hear the stories where someone resuscitated someone, and 20 years later, that person became a firefighter and they're now working side by side, or, just some of the feel good stories. We don't get enough of those, do we?
No, we don't. And I especially like those, especially with the recruitment. I know recruitment's hard everywhere, but I like running into stories where, like, whether they did it by a grant or whether they just, did it or not, really brought in departments and brought in new members and increased their staffing. I said one time in a presentation, when we were talking about deaths and woe and all this stuff and fear, I said, look, you can't expect people to come running to work for you when you spend every day shouting about all the woe that your job has. So and not saying we should deny or be hush about cancer and stress and suicide and actual traumatic fatalities, but like I've said this before, imagine you don't know anything about this job at all, and you go to Google, and some of the stuff you're going to see is that we're dying more than anybody else of cancer, or we're dying more than anybody else in suicide, or we're just wrecking our apparatus continually, or or dying every time we go on the roof. So, would you want that job?
Right. Yeah.
So it behooves us all, as the departments putting out the information, or as us as a site, to at the very, very least have a balance of good stories and bad stories.
And you search for those good stories. That's why I'm like, hey, Better Every Shift Nation, step up and send Bill some good stuff too, especially when it happens. So I'm gonna make that plea. It'd be great to start to focus on, hey, especially because you're listeners of the Better Every Shift. So if we can showcase some of the good things your department's doing recruitment wise, or I always love those feel good stories like we're talking about. Is there any story that you've covered the last couple of years that you're like, oh, I would have never guessed that? Something that just stood out to you that was like, man, this caught you by surprise.
Most recently, about a few weeks ago, we always try to do a photo of the day type, or photo of the week type of story. And I'd pulled the Denver Fire Department a while back. Had been doing every Friday. They've been doing like photos of the back end of all their engine companies, and I like the engine company over anything else. And so I thought, okay, well, that's going to be a good one because one, who doesn't like to talk about hose beds, and what the setups are. So I went through some of theirs and pulled their photos of the ones that they had up there. I think we had like 8 or 10, and ran that. And then it was neat. They saw our post about it and shared it and started it up again. They had slacked off, and then now, and so the last 2 Fridays I've been doing, here's the back end of this engine company, the back end of that engine company. So
that's cool.
Pretty cool.
I know that we've done, some great things here on the podcast about featuring. I know that Danny Pinter, who is a center for the Indianapolis Colts, and he dedicates his cleats to the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation for My Cleats, My Cause, and other stories like that. I when I read those, gives me a little bit of pride of being in the fire service. And those are the articles, obviously, you also look for. In your mind, what are the 2 or 3 that have just, got the most comments and got the most kind of play over the last year that maybe even still are? Do you remember?
Over the last year? Well, I mean, we have quite a few that hit that mark. I know I particularly liked the from last year, the FDNY roof rope rescue stories, where the one that involved the member from the squad company and then also the probationary firefighter. And it was like two or three roof rescues at the one fire. That was pretty cool. Recently, we just posted the story about the Montgomery County, Maryland firefighters who were involved in that, wetting down the baseball field because of the foul balls hitting.
Oh, yes. Yep.
And so, the local judge acquitted them of the charges for that. So that would be a popular one for us. And then, we've got the also the whole Tennessee Fire Department, that their chief and their members resigned because of a lack of support and frustration and funding. So,
we're seeing more of that too. We're seeing a lot of times chiefs just saying, "Hey, we need this support from the community financially, right?" And along with other things, we're starting to see that kind of story a little more commonly, aren't we?
A little bit. Yeah.
And a lot of it comes back to, we just don't market ourselves really well, right? It goes back to what we were just talking about. Hey, we need to market. We need to give ourselves credit sometimes. And you've worked with us for 20 some years, right? We're not very good at marketing. We don't get into the fire service to market ourselves and say, hey, look at what we did. Right.
Right. We don't do a good job at telling our own story. And so, you got to make that connection with your people and your community. And so, if you have to tell that story before things get to a head where you and everybody quit, certainly there's stuff that came up before then. So, right. you got to tell your story.
What are your favorite things to tell? Like, or what are your favorite things to write about? You've been doing the line of duty death. You've been doing the data. Is that continually fueling you? Because, and where else are you going with that, as far as what else is our data not telling us that we maybe think it is?
Yeah, I enjoy doing that a lot. The biggest thing for me now recently has been keeping up on them as far as the USFA being closed because of the shutdown. So we're not having those announcements. I think before the shutdown, we were at I think 63 or 65. Now we're at 70 by my track. So I like keeping up with those, and then all the little aspects in there. I get answering the questions too has been the big thing from some. I've had a few. How far back was it? Well, I think it was last year. A reader out in Canada had texted me, and said I'm sitting in a presentation here with our, I guess, province association. And the guy, he's made a comment that most of our fatalities here are due to apparatus accidents. Do you know if that's true? And so I did have that information because there's always that, especially on social media, somebody from Europe will say, well, this is how you Americans are killing each other. So
Yeah.
having some of that comparison. So I was able to look and I was able to say, yeah, he's telling you the truth. Most of your fatalities are because you're crashing apparatus. And he was like, great, I just wanted to know. And usually I usually get a lot of that text or email or phone call. Hey, so-and-so's in a presentation or so-and-so's saying this and they're not giving a source. Do you know if it's true or not? Yeah. I had this last week. A friend reviewing an article had a question about deaths during training and said that they had been rising over the last 5, 10, 15 years greatly. And I said, no, it's not.
Yeah, they're not increasing, but they're still happening, right? Like
they're still happening, yeah, but they're not increasing greatly over the years. So
overall, I mean, our line of duty deaths are increasing obviously cancer is playing into that and mental health, correct? Like, or is it trending down? What are you seeing overall?
Well, it's trending down. And one thing is with the USFA and the public safety officer benefits and the criteria from there, cancer is not counted. And suicide, I can't say suicide isn't counted because there have been a few very, very few numbers where they have been counted by the USFA. So it's muddy.
Yeah. Because I heard that cancer is now, right?
Well, they'll say cancer is, but as far as like our official data, which goes into all our reports, affects all our training, the benefits, the federal benefits from the Justice Department, all that. Cancer is not counted by the USFA, and in every yearly report they put out a disclaimer saying that because it's hard to make that direct correlation. Suicide, the USFA has counted some suicides, but again, there's been a definite, at least reported to them, maybe not public to us, but reported to them, a definite connection drawn between the work and the death. So most of ours, as far as the official, are the stress overexertion due to cardiac arrest or heart attack or stroke.
Okay.
And those have been going down. They've all been going down.
Ooh, okay. But I think, when people ask me that question, I always think they're going up because we're including cancers now. So what's including that cancer then? It's not the USFA. Is it just third party like data or?
Yeah, the IAAF counts cancer.
Okay. So that's where we're getting those numbers up. And I think in that, of course, when you add those two other components, obviously we're going to see an increase in the next couple of years because of that. But when USFA is they're looking at the actual, like during the job, like trainings, like we were just talking about, or academies, and not a cadet or a recruit, depending upon the definition, right? So all of a sudden, here we go, like, right? There's that muddy gray area getting. Okay. Yeah. It's very interesting stuff. And as you start to look at it, what sources do you go? Do you go right to the USFA? Do you go, how far have you found yourself digging?
I dig into everything. So at work, I'll usually find the news report, or then the USFA report. And then most times it's a text, it's email. Hey, we've had this Mayday. Just let you know, it's not for public, but this has happened. And then what I do in the writing in there is I'll record that. But then in some instances, the USFA narrative will say the firefighter died doing X. But 3 or 4 of the local news outlets will say the firefighter died doing XYZ. So that gives me a heads up. It's like, okay, well, they might have been listed as fire attack, but maybe they were doing ventilation or vice versa. Is that a big deal? Some people on the whole might say, no, that's not a big deal. Dead's dead. But I do it, and again, not sorry for like the victims and the departments, but just the data itself that, 1 or 2 off really affects these lump sum numbers that are given to you in the yearly reports, and that instructors, contributors, presenters say oftentimes without quoting or citing their sources, and gives people a false idea of how we're dying and how we're not dying. So,
Yeah.
and then what I do is I go back later, and depending on whether it's, say, a NIOSH report or an independent report or the department report, then I can go back in there and say, and I have done this quite a bit over the years, just found that, okay, uh, when they died, this was initially how it was listed as what they were doing, but now the report's out, and so this changes. And I've found that with a number of differences between the USFA report and the NIOSH report.
Yeah, you're right though. Some people are probably listening to this going, "Hey, Zam, it doesn't matter, apples to apples." And some would say, "Well, it may help determine, like, all of a sudden there's maybe a trend that we're not finding out because the data isn't as detailed as possible." And I think, I'd say thank you for doing that, because it may bring forth something, right? Like we don't know, and the more we can dig into it, the more precise we can be, the possibly the better prepared we can be. And I think you already hit the nail on the head with some things that we can do, right? Like, goes back to, what you said, have EMS on board, do a better screening, to get into the fire service with our medicals, and do it every year, right? Like, like you said, it still surprises you. What about even in some of those, do you find departments, they don't require anything physically, just the CPAT to come in, and then, right? Like, there's not a lot of departments that require anything annually other than maybe a fitness test, if that, right?
Yeah. And I say, if you're in a department that's like that, for whatever reason they are, you at least owe it to your family and yourself. I mean, just go to the doctor once a year and get checked out and make sure you're squared away. And as you get older and hit those certain age marks, get those special exams that you're supposed to get. 1, for your family, 2, for yourself, and then 3, for the people riding the rigs with you. I mean, would you want to know that if you have something bad that might, keep you from doing it? Well, you see, that's one thing that I don't always agree with. Whenever we run the fire service media sites run these types of stories about, recruitment and deaths during training and things like that, and standards, things like that, and I try to have physical benchmarks. Usually the comment is like, "Oh, or all the senior guys are going to be gone, and you have to fire those guys," or you're. It's like, no. One, especially if you're paid on the job, that's not how your labor management's going to work. Your union is going to be involved. There's going to be some process where, like, whether you're given 6 months to a year to, like, get yourself squared away and then take a test, or you take the test and then they give you time afterwards to squared away. It's not going to be like you take this test and if you fail, you're gone.
Right. Yeah.
Nobody's union contract's going to work that way.
No.
And then on the volunteer side, would you rather work it and being in poor shape, have some undiagnosed condition, and every time you're up at the firehouse, you're sucking gas? Or would you rather find out before you start, "Oh, I have this condition, but it's correctable, and it might set me back a year from joining, but I can still join and be healthier,"
and be a better contributor, right? To the whole department,
Right.
I think I've had conversations with people like, "Oh, I don't, sometimes I prefer not to know." And I'm like, well, tell that to my significant other, because I'm the one who's going to go in after you, and I will. And if it's something that you can prevent, a particular situation where, RIT doesn't have to be deployed, or people don't have to go in after you, because that puts everybody in danger. And I think that's a really good way. That was said to me many, many years ago as to why do we need to do annual medicals. It's not for us. It's for our significant others and our, other team members' significant others. And I think you said that very well. And the data is really pointing back to, like, in those situations, a lot of situations that would have helped.
Yeah.
Right. Same thing with, we do some dumb stuff, but we also could do some pretty cool stuff. And I'm going to make another kind of request to our listeners to send Bill some stuff that, lightens his day up a little bit sometimes. And that makes it easy to report. And we're going to try to get some more positive stories in front of you. That's our goal here with Better Every Shift. And with that, I always like to ask, something that's memorable, something that sticks out. You've given us some great stuff of to, hey, take care of ourselves. Let's be smart about training. Let's be smart about, just what we do. As far as like other advice you would offer to the fire service that you think, hey, this is what I want every firefighter. I think every firefighter needs to understand and know. I mean, from your readings and from the things that you've researched, what would that be?
Be a better reader. No matter what your bent is toward your specialty or the company you work with or for or whatnot, just be a better reader. That's the biggest thing I always share with all my presentations is writing. I haven't found, I don't have a secret into deciphering all this fatality information. I just have time. And I spend time, calling and looking and writing and reading and rereading and rereading and rereading. And so, it's hard with social media because when, like, my gosh, a video of a truck company on the roof, people just go wild.
Yeah.
And yeah, there've been fatalities for that over the American Fire Service history, but nowhere near the amount that the outrage projects. And so, be a better reader. One, it helps you understand, our fatalities and our risks better. Two, it helps you have better dialogue with somebody who might be, opposing whatever tactic your department uses. And then three, it slows you down. You become less reactive online. You have that critical thinking pause to say, wait a minute, where did this person get this from? Like I said before, I get this all the time. Hey, so and so said this, so and so wrote that. Can you tell me if it's correct?
Before they react, get the whole story, right? Like, and do your own investigation a lot of times, right? We
had 2 years ago, I had here in Prince George's County, the union, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, the union asked me, hey, could you come, we're doing a like a half day classroom, morning, hands-on, afternoon, and we're doing basement fires. Can you come and talk about fatality data regarding basement fires? So, okay, sure. So I did 20 years worth of LODDs involving basement fires and shared with them that, what the true numbers are and so forth. And then during break, before we went out for the hot part, a couple of recruits, a couple of new members of the department had come up and said, so let me get this straight. And I'm not like trying to cheapen what you're saying, but basically what you're saying is it's not all that bad. I was like, exactly. It's not, still dangerous, still risky, but the sky's not falling.
Yeah. Right. There's a lot more there's a lot of other factors that we can control that we need to focus on other than, in addition to, I should say these, but I think the other point, like we've kind of talked a little bit behind the scenes, you get someone who's like, they should be off the roof. But the person that's saying that hasn't had their annual medical, hasn't done all those other things to make sure that they're staying whole. Right.
Right.
And I think that is the message and a great takeaway. And the other thing you had mentioned, and I'll kind of, bring it all back home with this, like before people comment, find the whole story, read and become a researcher themselves. Right. And I agree 100%. You also said something about pausing in there. And you see a lot of that too, where you could tell people don't pause. They just start ripping off, right? The comments.
Yeah. And it's, I get it. To each his own in a sense, but I could say, look, I like the phrase, you do you, and so if I see something about a department somewhere and I don't agree with it, not to be flippant, but I don't care. The department I care about is the one down the street responding to my house. And at the time, the ones I was members with, that's the department I care about. Why get so wrapped up around the axle about what some department is doing 2 states or more away from you?
Yeah.
Just spend that energy doing something else, because all you're wasting time.
Or like you said, spend that time getting a little bit smarter, learning the whole story, understanding, right? Maybe there's a reason they're doing it that you're not. But before you react, learn, research, right? And I think that's what a great way to summarize kind of, what we talked about today. I mean, there's a lot of stuff about line of duty death, and I thank you by the way, for being here. I mean, this is great conversation about how we need to get a little better with our line of duty data, and when there is that, ask questions, really look into it, and then, make sure we cover our basis. Right? There's so many things that we can prevent here. And so thank you for enlightening all of that for us. And I just love your whole point about be a better reader, because that's what we're about here on the Better Every Shift podcast. We're about just learning something, doing something, and sharing something to make you and those around you better every shift. Mm-hmm. And with that, I'll say thanks for listening, and look forward till the next time.